Hi, this is Rick Frederick with a review of Poole and Lindsay's 2001 Children's Eyewitness Reports After Exposure to Misinformation from Parents. It was a 24-page article, none of it wasted. So this review is going to do the article no justice by getting into all of the important information in there. So I encourage you to read and study this article if this is an area of interest for you. The takeaway is that judgments about the accuracy of children's testimony must consider the possibility of exposure to misinformation prior to formal interviews. So that's what they did here, is they manipulated what children knew or believed about an event, and then interviewed them. Children ranging from 3 to I think 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, consistently showing the influence of misinformation prior to the interview. So this is this is a replication or a furthering of the Mr. Science study that they reported, I think, in the 90s. So let's just talk about some principles here before we talk about their study. Even young children can provide quite detailed and accurate accounts of past events under some conditions, but that even older children and adults provide impoverished and inaccurate accounts under others. So there's no bright line at which you can say the testimony will not be reliable, this testimony will be reliable. It all has to do with the nature of how the information was gained. And so the studies like this are important ways to show what problem areas are. So here they looked at the effect of misleading information presented to young children by their parents prior to and outside of an interview situation. So again, a repeat of the Mr. Science project. Here the kids meet with Mr. Science, who does some tricks for them. Then the children are interviewed about what happened in the interview. And if you can see their table here, the rate of errors is very low. So when you just do a neutral, give me some information about what happened, 10% of the 3-year-olds had some intrusion errors, but everybody else is down at 1 or 2% level. Now, what the manipulation is that 3.5 months after the Mr. Science session, parents were mailed books that the researchers had produced about the visit. And the books had 2 events that didn't happen and 2 events that did happen. I think like the events that didn't happen was that Mr. Science put a yucky cloth in their mouth and maybe put a sticker on their tummy and it hurt. Neither of which happened. But the books say that these things did happen, and then the manipulation is that the parents were going to read the stories to their children. Then there were interviews, session 2 and session 3, further interviews that asked open-ended direct questions and then used a source monitoring procedure. Where did you get this information? And after this manipulation, 21% of all children reported events that never occurred, and then session 3, this persisted. And what was fascinating about the study is that there was no difference by age for the accuracy. So in the free recall, highly accurate information about things that did happen. But then what happens when you begin to ask direct yes-no questioning about did this happen, this happened? Well, then they were affected by the suggestibility. If you ask a child, did something happen, and they say no, then if you persist in questioning, which is often what the concern is in forensic interviewing, a child says, no, he didn't touch me, or no, this didn't happen, or then they went on to then say that it did happen and then describe events that didn't happen in good detail. Okay. Younger children were more prone to acquiescence for non-experience events. Children who heard their parents describe non-experience events sometimes reported having experienced them when asked directly, and they were often willing to describe them. A lot of stuff in this paper. Children's willingness to provide narrative detail cannot be taken as evidence of the accuracy of a yes response. If a child said yes, something did happen, they were able or they were willing subsequently to provide at least some narrative detail. Source monitoring was interesting. Prior to formal source monitoring questions, few children spontaneously mentioned the misleading story in a way that would alert interviewers to contaminating influences. Again, rich paper. There's just like maybe 20 or 30 points to take away from this paper. So again, it's well worth your time. Source monitoring was helpful with the older children. And fictitious events often infiltrated children's narratives, even during early non-suggestive stages of the interview. Okay, what else here? Open invitations didn't increase the proportion of false information. Okay, so the suggestion here is you should make that the longest part of your forensic interview rather than switching to specific questions. So specific questions are problematic. Children's responses to yes/no questions were alarmingly inaccurate, with one important exception about touch events that were neither experienced or suggested. So they did respond to, he touched you, put yucky stuff in your mouth, he pressed and hurt your tummy when he put the sticker on. But for things that were not suggested or experienced, they were resistant to that. Youngest children rarely rejected the fictitious events that they had previously reported. Fictitious touch experiences appeared in the children's free recall narratives as often as reports of fictitious science demonstrations. Okay, so 128 subjects, I think, starting with. They lost 14, I think, but 114. 4 interviews, books made, parents participating. This was a great study. It's well worth reading. Thank you.